I want to welcome back in our panel this morning. We've got our White House correspondent, Emerald Robinson, host of Stacy on the Right, Stacy Washington, senior contributor for The Federalist, Benjamin Weingarten is here, and former Trump staff advisor and a Newsmax contributor, Andrew Giuliani. Today is also the one-year anniversary of the WHO, Dr. Tedros, who we heard from a moment ago, declaring coronavirus a pandemic. Now, that happened on March 11th, 2020, but on March 9th, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who we've also heard a lot from over the last year, said this. Take a listen.
There is no reason, if you want to go on a cruise ship, to go on a cruise ship. Personally, I would never go on a cruise ship because I don't like cruises.
Emerald, we will start with you, our White House correspondent. My issue with that is that Dr. Fauci has been an infectious disease specialist for a long, long time. He has looked at the possibility of future outbreaks like something like the coronavirus for a long time. He worked on the AIDS virus for a long time. He said that.
A long history of botching responses.
And he said that, and that misinformation, people heard that. People heard that and took that as gospel, and then who knows, maybe went on a cruise and got the coronavirus. But this is 2 days before the WHO called this thing a pandemic. And Dr. Fauci is still revered in most circles.
And Tedros still has a job,
exactly,
as you pointed out. It was almost a year ago that I asked former President Trump in the Rose Garden when he was talking about withdrawing from the WHO, would he require Tedros resigning as a part of a reform for the U.S. to take part. And well, a year later, Tedros still has a job. That's how these international institutions work, though, quite often. It's been talked about the bureaucracy and falling upward. I think it was Ben in an earlier segment. And, you know, Dr. Fauci is the highest paid federal government employee. And look at how he's handled this.
It's just, I was not surprised that Joe Biden decided to stick with Dr. Fauci. But in a way, this guy's been a bureaucrat for 40 years. Yeah. Benjamin Weingarten, nice to see you. There is a study out that said that people now wash their hands 9 times a day. We're still in the middle of this pandemic. It's been going on for a year. You know, it's probably a good thing. But the study concluded that we're going to see more germ-conscious people than ever before. You ever seen the movie The Aviator with Leonardo DiCaprio, Howard Hughes? You know, at the end of that movie, Howard Hughes is, he's germ-conscious as well. But the article kind of made that comparison. Are we going to have a society of germaphobes once we're through this thing?
So we're all Howard Hughes now, is what you're saying, which is a scary thought for American society. Look, I think it also bears noting there's a theme that weaves through kind of all the stories that we've been covering, whether it's the coronavirus purported relief bill, but really a blue state bailout in effect, whether it's the lax immigration policies cast as humane, or whether it's Dr. Fauci and the government's policies, draconian policies with respect to coronavirus that fly in the face of the science, which is that it's always about being humane is how they present it. But in reality, it's about politics. Again, immigration, ultimately, from the Democrat perspective, is about trying to have a permanent Democrat majority. The coronavirus relief was about trying to show that we're compassionate, but in reality, only a small percentage goes to the people who are actually victimized by it, while the rest of it goes to unions and to bail out pensions and to bail out the blue states that completely botched their responses. And then you go to Dr. Fauci, and he himself has admitted that many of his statements were political. They were not based in the science, but they were intended to get a certain policy outcome, which is to say nothing of the fact that, remember, this whole draconian response started by looking at these models that were garbage in, garbage out, and saying millions of people could die if we don't shut down everything, which has never been done before in the history of America.
We've never quarantined the healthy in human history. Never before. This is the first time we've ever done that. Stacy, good morning. I want to bring you in. By the way, I enjoyed being on your radio show a couple of days ago. That was a good time. It was a long time. I was on for like 20 minutes, by the way. Did you air that segment that we did?
Absolutely, every minute of it. And people loved it. I already have emails saying how wonderful you were.
Well, Emerald, we talked about the royal family, of which I know very little about. And I tried. I spoke from the heart. Stacy, 2 questions for you, Stacy. Do you think that the misinformation that Dr. Fauci has spewed over the last year has ended up costing American lives? And do you think that this is more of a 10,000-foot perspective on this? But I think that once we're through all this, Dr. Fauci will be one of the people that we identify as the face of this whole thing in a negative way, not a positive way. You agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I agree with that, Rob. And I think one of the things that we can't predict is how, 2 years from now or 4 years from now or 20 years from now, we'll look back on this thing. But we do know that we don't quarantine healthy people. We did that this time to disastrous results. And once we know the full weight of the children who've dropped out of the educational system, children who committed suicide, businesses that were lost forever, economic outcomes and trajectories that were forever changed, he is going to be a point of derision in this entire story. So he's the face now. He so loves being portrayed by Brad Pitt on the shows on the weekend and all of that.
Yeah.
But he really has made horrible decisions, and they will come about him later. It's just not going to be a satisfying result for those of us who think he should be held accountable now.
That was very generous casting with Brad Pitt, by the way, when I saw that.
You know what was interesting is that we are seeing the tide turn just a little bit, because he was actually pressed by a CNN anchor this week on why he's saying that if you're vaccinated, you still should not travel. He had no answer. There was no science behind it.
And he couldn't believe that he was getting a tough question, Emerald.
He couldn't.
Yeah, he was.
You saw the surprise on his face.
I think it was with John Berman. I think he was on with John Berman. He was. Dr. Fauci was like, "Well, but you can't go out because we need to control you still." Andrew Giuliani, good to see you. You worked in the Trump White House for a long time. Some news that broke late last night. Geraldo Rivera, 77 years old. He is considering a run for the Senate in the state of Ohio. Now, look, we're still, 2022 is a long way off, but he tweeted this out. He said, pondering running for Rob Portman's seat in the Senate. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Geraldo definitely spent a little time in the White House there. I think we're going to see really a bunch of fascinating races here. I know at least the House race, one of the guys I worked with in the White House, Max Miller, has announced that he's going to be running for Anthony Gonzalez's seat. It's going to be a fascinating lead up to 2022 to see who gets involved. That's the first time I'm actually seeing about Geraldo right now. I'm sure it's going to be fascinating. You mentioned Capone's vault earlier on.
Right.
I hope there's more in it than just Capone's vault, but it will certainly be a very interesting race to tune into if Geraldo's involved.
Emerald, quick reaction. By the way, the Capone's vault, that made Geraldo, that story. That was like way back in the 80s yeah. Emerald, go ahead, your reaction.
I was just saying J.D. Vance is also looking at that seat, and he's an interesting contender. Clearly, he has some name recognition from Hillbilly Elegy, and, he specifically talks about the gutting of the middle class, which would resonate with Ohioans.
And Lara Trump, the best kept secret right now. I think there's no question that she will be on the ballot in North Carolina in a couple of years as well. Panel, we got to leave it there. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Great conversation as always.